Oh, great, Joe. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Thanks for coming. Excited to have you. How was your trip, by the way?
Which one? The one from New Zealand was a blast. As you know, that's how I got to know you. Is we do that couple retreat. If anybody you're married, have a partner or spouse, it's important to take those retreats, especially if you're an independent owner, is a business owner like you and I. We seem to wear many hats and to work a lot of day and night. So it's important to take that time to spend that time with your significant other. I think that's more important than the sights we see. But it brings back a lot of memories, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
That's so true. I couldn't agree more. Did you see any crocodiles?
Not on this trip. Well, we did on the trip 2 trips ago, right?
Yeah. So let's just jump right in here, if you don't mind. I recently saw one of your posts where you were getting a little bit vulnerable, and you said something about the willingness to do that based on people's ability to relate. And I absolutely can. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Your post was saying something about going through some hardship after a different career and some house changing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Wow. I hopefully I don't get a little too emotional here, but tell you what, it's the worst thing and best thing that's ever happened to me. For those of you, obviously a lot of people may not know me from, your show, but there was a time when I lost everything, and I started social media about 3 years ago. So I haven't been on social media very long, but I use social media I started out for tips and tricks for insurance agents to teach them how to do what I do. But it evolved from there to interviewing other successful entrepreneurs and business owners. And, I've had to learn to tell my story and how I became who I am today. And part of that is I, in 2008, I never thought I'd grow up and be in the industry I am today. I don't think anybody grows up and says, hey, I want to be in the insurance business. In 2008, in the week before Thanksgiving, I was given my last paycheck and said, there was the door. I ran a $33 million, I ran a construction company. I was the project manager. I was in charge of 150 employees at the peak. We did about $33 million in revenue. Over that time frame, multiple big developments that I developed, as well as small commercial, and then, hundreds of homes, thousands of homes.
Wow.
And I was in charge of building those. So they gave me my last paycheck, and, I'd built my so-called dream home. At least I thought it was between the 7th and 11th course of a golf course. I'd be like, hey, I've got everything. Everybody, the American dream is to own a home. And I was getting my last paycheck. And as you know, in 08, 09, that's when the economy was in turmoil with the housing market. And so I called up the bank and said, hey, I'd really like to do a forbearance, basically tacking on my payment to the back end of my loan until I got my feet underneath me so that I could make the payment and move forward, so I didn't have to get kicked out of my house. And they're like, we can't help you until you make until you're in default. I've never missed a payment on a mortgage ever. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll miss a payment. Well, in the process, from the short version, from November to April, my house was sold, and there was nothing I could do about it. I tried getting a new job. I worked 17 different jobs. I was working day and night, just anything I could do to save my house. And it forced me to then move in with my parents. And, as a dad, a father, as a spouse, that really hurt. Especially when, getting my feet underneath me and figuring out what I want to do when I grew up. It was like the rug was ripped out from underneath me. And I'm like, my parents had a big house. They were grateful. I'm still grateful for my parents to this day, moving to that house. And I moved from my parents' house. We were there for 4 years, where I figured out what I was going to do, doing the business I do now. And I worked the business I do now part-time until I was able to jump in full-time. And then it was the house I could afford. And from the house I could afford to a house my dream house. Well, that was the dream house for a time being. And then my wife's like, we need to remodel and so on, which is fine. It's why I do what I do. We do a lot for our significant others, and the location's great, but she doesn't like the finishes. She wants it to be more open. A lot of the new houses have an open floor plan. And so seems like we're always looking, and never close the door being like, hey, this is the end all be all. So we're always, looking for houses. I think you and I talked a little bit about what's going on and look at some lots, but nothing's really felt right. I'm convinced that the universe puts things in your path, and you basically need to look into them until the universe smacks you upside the head and tells you, you need to stop.
Yeah.
So that is the version of the last, 15 years in a nutshell.
Isn't it crazy how it's about stepping stones, really, right? Like that first house, getting out of your parents' house might not have been the forever home, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. You got to get your independence going. And I've been there, man. I appreciate that story. What would you say to anyone else going through that kind of hardship right now, maybe?
Never give up. I mean, in the moment, things may look rough. One of the defining moments in my life, and my wife tells me, she said, Ty, you can't dwell on that. And it was this. My daughter, my oldest daughter, she's 20, going to turn 22 this year. And she came to me and she was probably 8. And we were in my mom and dad's house for maybe a month. And she says, Dad, when can we move back into our old house? Dude, that was like, just a knife in my back and twisted. And to see the look in her eyes, I'm like, I made a decision that day that nobody would ever control my destiny again. And that's why I became an independent business owner, entrepreneur, and why I do what I do. Because you know what? We all fell. In my podcast show, I see similarities where successful people have failed many times. And what the difference between someone who is successful and not is that I got up one more time. That's it. I got up one more time.
Well, you fell forward, right? You either
that's right.
learn or win. So that's the difference.